Mrs. Allen was the widow of a prominent official. Her late husband had managed to amass enough fortune for his wife and son to live comfortably. The woman always believed that she, and especially her son, deserved only the best. But Nathan was soft and compliant by nature, so the woman was most afraid that her son would be easy prey for any hunter of prospective men. She considered practically all the girls who even just happened to be near Nathan as such. Miss Allen was sure that the best match for her son was the one she would choose for him by herself. And soon such a girl appeared on the horizon. Alice was the daughter of good friends of Miss Allen, who were a respected family in the city. But it was at this time Nathan introduced his mother to his girlfriend Rita, with whom, as it turned out, he had been dating for 6 months. Rita was very modestly dressed, and Miss Allen was horrified that she had not noticed, in time, the inappropriate passion of her son. And when she talked to the girl a little, she was even more horrified. It turned out that the girl was from a single-parent family. Her father abandoned them long ago. Her mother was an invalid, and they could barely make ends meet. Mrs. Allen immediately realized that for someone like Rita, Nathan was a great match. She was not reassured. Even the fact that Rita studied together with Nathan in the same university, received a scholarship, and was almost the best student at the time. In general, Mrs. Allen decided to act immediately. She asked Nathan to go to the bakery on the corner to buy pastries for tea. And in the meantime, she said many unflattering words to Rita. The poor girl had not expected such a response and practically ran out of the house. Mrs. Allen shouted in her back that her son already had a fiancée and that he needed people like Rita only for fun. Mrs. Allen's plan succeeded, and she never saw or heard from Rita again. Of course, Nathan was offended at first, but soon Alice appeared beside him and Nathan no longer remembered about Rita. Mrs. Allen was over the moon and already made ambitious plans. But it turned out that she rejoiced too early. Alice was not a gift, and being a girl from a wealthy family, she loved parties, festivities, and all kinds of entertainment, and little by little she involved Nathan in this whirlpool. Mrs. Allen noticed that Nathan came home more and more often, a little drunk, and began to skip university classes. The worried mother tried to cope with it, but Nathan, suddenly, for the first time in his life, began to argue with her and even raise his voice at her, and one day he almost hit her. And then Alice's parents sounded the alarm too, and sent her to a private boarding school for spoiled children that she was able to get rid of destructive habits. The wedding had to be postponed for some time. Nathan stayed at home and little by little sank deeper and deeper into a whirlpool of drunkenness, merriment, and rampant partying. Several years passed, and today it is difficult to recognize in Mrs. Allen that stately, arrogant woman who she was 3 or 4 years ago. Now the woman's whole life was an almost futile struggle for her son. The treatment took all her savings, and now she was barely able to make ends meet. Little by little, she began to sell some of her furniture and personal belongings, but there was still not enough money. Because of the problems, Mrs. Allen began to get sick more and more often. Many times the woman wondered where and how she had gone wrong, and why she and her son had suffered so much. But she always found an excuse that she did everything right and in the best interests of her family. The epiphany came by accident. One day, Mrs. Allen was on her way to the hospital to visit her son and slipped right on the crosswalk. There was no one around to help her. Suddenly, a beautiful car stopped a few yards away from her, and a girl got out and helped Mrs. Allen to her feet. "Are you all right?" she asked. Mrs. Allen looked up and immediately recognized her. Rita, the same hapless girl she had once turned away from her home. Of course, there was no trace of the modest girl now. She looked like a serious businesswoman, fashionably dressed, in an expensive car. Rita also recognized Mrs. Allen, though it was even harder to do so. Nevertheless, the young woman offered to get her to the hospital. On the way, they got into a conversation. Seeing her exuberance, Mrs. Allen could not resist quipping that Rita must have married well. Rita decided not to be offended and told it like it was. Her father, who had abandoned her and her mother many years before, died prematurely. And before his death, probably feeling guilty before his daughter, left her his spacious apartment and some savings. Rita sold the apartment and opened her small business. It took a while, but business began booming, and now she was doing well. She hasn't had time to marry yet, but just recently a very nice man proposed to her, so the wedding was not far off. "And how is Nathan doing?" asked Rita, telling all about herself. "He's doing well too, isn't he?" Instead of an answer, Mrs. Allen asked to stop, because she supposedly got motion sickness in the car. Although it was still a long way to the hospital, Mrs. Allen hurriedly left her companion. What could she say to her? That almost, on the last Monday she was carrying her son in the hospital homemade pie and fruit, or that he would throw everything on the floor again when he saw it, and then he would ask her rudely why she hadn't brought him a drink. Could things have been different now if she hadn't thrown this girl out of the house? Probably, yes, or maybe not. But she wanted what was best. Life isn't fair.